But he's also got great experience from outside of the recruitment industry, lessons that he's learned he's going to share with us today. So please everybody, put your hands together for our good friend, Dirk Meeuws.
Thank you, Hang. Really appreciate the kind words, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. My talk will be about building a lean, mean recruitment machine, and for that I'm going to include practices which I learned from aerospace engineering. I think that's where you are hinting from, but also other examples in case of production, car manufacturing, Lego, and how can we use those practices to actually build a better recruitment engine. So let's start with this picture here. So this is a plant facility where they build cars during World War II, and I'll explain later on what you're going to see here. But what we see at Recruits, some of the, let's say, recruitment processes look like this, where the boxes is candidates, recruiters munching LinkedIn, finding the right candidates, and having a real hard time navigating and finding the right candidates for the right position. How it should look. But it's a little bit this, a little bit more neat. Some of you work for a manufacturing company or a supply chain company, and then you might be familiar with some of these things. So on the top left, you see the Lego factory where they build Lego blocks, one of the most awesome things I had as a childhood. The Volkswagen plant in Wolfsburg, and of course, I think this is the A320 assembly line. And what you see here in common is how much cleaner and leaner this is than the other things, than the other picture I just showed you. A little bit about myself. I'm Dirk. My mission in life has always been to solve complex puzzles. As you can see here, sometimes get some help, but the most important is that you reward yourself if you do it right. So wait for it. It's important that when you solve life's challenges, that you make yourself proud and clap for yourself, right? So it's always a nice addition to when you solve something, be proud of that. So, about lean principles and eliminating waste, because waste is one of the most important things in lean processes. This is the thing that you want to eliminate. It all started in Toyota, so Han already said that productivity in Japan is sky booming, and that's actually kind of true. So if you look at all the modern facilities and production lines, they're all inspired by Toyota. So what Toyota did, they started in 1948, or they didn't start in 1948, they started in 1948 with the TPS, Toyota Production System, and this was a methodology, a philosophy, to make sure that their production would be far more efficient than they were doing. And by doing so, you see Toyota Hiluxes and all these kinds of cars all over the world, right? So they were able to produce with a high quality, high productivity, a lot of automation as well, but that only helped build this awesome product, which then again employed many people. And according to, let's say, TPS, Toyota Production System, the main objective was to eliminate waste in the production process. And there are, in their terms, 8 kinds of things in the process which is waste, which you need to reduce because that doesn't add value to your final product. One is overproduction. So knowing what you need to produce, right? So because if you have overproduction, you need to throw stuff away. You have wasted resources which you could have saved or not used, which is just a waste. Time on hand, idle time, waiting time, that's just basically that a station or people working at some part of the process are doing nothing, are waiting for raw goods to come in or whatsoever. They're just not productive, so it's not value added to the final product. Third one is transportation. Moving stuff from A to B doesn't add any value to your end product. It just is waste of resources. Processing itself, in some cases, this is value added, right? If you, for example, strengthen material or reformulate, but most of the processes they had back then were not adding value to the final car. Stock at hand, so that's something we saw in the first picture. If you buy too many raw goods, that's just waste because you're not using them. Movement, a little bit the same as transportation. Making defective products, which always incurs when there's a lot of stress. You want to meet deadlines. You have bottlenecks which are not being utilized well enough. and last but not least, underutilized workers. So the main two pillars of Toyota from 1948 were two mantras, two things that they tried to nail. One is just in time. That means that every single input or raw material for each and every process came just at the right time. There was no idle time. It just came when they needed it the most. And the second is automation, which is not per se automation, but that is automation with the human touch. Right? So we sometimes see people claim that everything can be automated, that everything is, let's say, artificial intelligence-able, but that's not true. There's always a human judgment on that. It makes things better, fits the needs of the end customer better, and actually creates the best products. So I won't go into much detail about this. So you see the Toyota assembly line. That means that they now go to a conveyor belt. All those, let me mute this one. Can you hear me now? Does it? Yeah, it's better. So you see that the car goes through the whole factory, as you saw with the Volkswagen example. And on every station, every material is there to make sure that the final product, the car, is being created. So going back to rocket science or aerospace engineering, this is the assembly line of the A320, right? And what you see here is a really clean manufacturing line. So you see that those A380 or A320s are not moving at all. So they are brought there in place. The wings are flown in, inception. There is a rig installed around the aircraft to make sure that everything can be montaged right there, right then. And you don't see any stock of piles of inventory, right? So making sure that everything is there just in time to just, let's say, assemble that aircraft makes it that they increase the quality, increase productivity, and make sure that they deliver the best final product. Volkswagen assembly line, similar to Toyota's, right? So it's a whole streamlined process where all the goods are put into these processes, and at every station, sometimes there's human work, sometimes there's robot arms that take care of assembling the Volkswagen. And here you see just a really clean, well-organized, labeled Lego production line where you just know where to find things, which again makes things a little bit more efficient. So if you then compare what you see here, that's just a total mess. You don't know where to look at. You have a lot of waste, and that's just a waste of resources. So the other thing I want to touch before I make the transition into how we can use this into recruitment is the theory of constraints. So one question to you. So example, this is a plant or a production line. You have 3 steps in the process. So the first one creates 100 parts an hour. The second creates 40 parts an hour. And the third one, 60 parts an hour. What's the maximum throughput of this production line? 40. That's correct. And in what you see, and actually in this example, is that every station is managed by itself. So they try to manage the hundreds, make sure that you create 100 parts an hour, because then you have 100% usability. 40, you create 40 an hour. 60, you create 60 an hour. But that's just a waste of resource, because that means that you are overproducing 60 parts an hour, which you need other things for, right? So compare that sometimes, if you look at recruitment, it could be that you are hiring a lot of candidates which you're not able to process during like interviewing, doing intakes. You're not able to process. So you have this whole stock of candidates which are not replied, which don't receive any communication, which just sucks, right? Because again, what Lieselot told us, it's important that you leave a really great candidate experience. So, does it mean, is this, in my belief, the 360 recruiter in the nowadays, I'm not sure if that is really the right way to go. And I'll elaborate that a little bit further. Right, so let's have this example where you have 1,000 applications, where you have 250 interviews, where you have 60-second interviews, 15 final interviews, and only 10 hires. Right, so this is something which we see across our customers quite a lot. Right, so you have this process, you think you're doing a really good job, you have all these interviews going on, a lot of highly qualified candidates, But if you then see how much interviews you're doing which are not turning into qualified candidates, that's a lot waste of resources, 240. This is what's going on. And what then happens, we don't have enough qualified candidates, we need to bump up the marketing to make sure that there are more candidates flowing in, which then creates more waste. So what happens if you raise the bar at the beginning and only process the highly qualified candidates, then suddenly you free up a lot of time, which then helps recruiters to really be the consultant during the life cycle of a candidate. Right, so it frees up time, it de-stresses one of the bottlenecks of most recruitment processes, and also increase your conversion rate from qualified to higher, which is valuable because that means that your recruiters can really have time to have that human conversation with their candidates. So if you look at the role of consultants, and I'm looking at talent acquisition, so direct employers, so the ones who are talking with the hiring managers versus recruiters, there are a couple of things which I think are different, and that's why I don't believe that 360 recruiters are still the way to go. So first of all, if you look at a consultant, actually that's a low volume job. And with low volume, I mean, of course, it's relative, but you're not processing hundreds of candidates. You have a couple of job opportunities, either from your hiring manager or from the market which you're trying to acquire. And you really want to be that career consultant to guide your candidates to become the best version of themselves, right? We're talking about purpose, and most purposes of most companies is to enrich people's lives. And if you really can focus on that instead of sourcing, you can really do that. So being the HR organization consultant, which both helps the hiring manager understand what he needs, but also the candidate on what he needs to do to be successful in life, that should be, in my belief, the role of the consultant. And that means that he or she should focus on highly qualified candidates. If you look at more the sourcing aspect, the recruiter or the traffic police, however you want to call it, that's a high volume job. You're receiving a lot of candidates, you're sourcing from LinkedIn, you're sourcing from other channels, and you need to qualify and nurture them to see whether they are ready for a new job opportunity. Also, recruiters are the ones that indeed need to find the qualified candidates, but in the ideal world, they should help the consultant with, hey, these are the 10 top-notch, highly qualified candidates, they're ready to go. Give them the best experience possible to make sure that they fit the right job position. So if you compare those two things, that's a really different ballgame, right? Being a highly quality, like having a low volume job where you focus on quality, and a high volume job where you focus on the output, highly qualified candidates. If you would do that in 1 week, that would mean that one day you would call a couple of leads, the other day you will maybe source hundreds of candidates, and then switch back again. People suck at multitasking. So if you would do this in your day-to-day job, you can imagine that marketing gets stressed, like, okay, I need more candidates because I cannot find them. And what we then see is a lot of stockpiling up, so in-process candidates, a lot of candidates that don't hear anything from the consultant after they get hired, or after they're rejected, or after they're interviewed, because they're just busy with their day-to-day job. So this also touched upon with previous talks. What is important here is to have a candidate-centric design. And I have broken this down into 3 things. One is lean process design. So what does it mean? How do I reduce waste and inefficiencies within my process to make sure that I can deliver the best candidate-centric design? Rejecting a candidate earlier in the process is actually a better candidate experience than rejecting them later on just for the sake of having a high amount of quality candidates. So that also means that you need to help specialism teams within your organization, can be a marketing team, can be a recruitment team, can be a sales team, to really focus on one thing and do that one thing really great. Second part is digitization. So what is important here is that digitalization is really important, because not knowing what's going on within your recruitment process will not help you create this awesome candidate journey. So that means there are a couple of things involved in this. So one is automating high volume activities. Right? So you see with the likes of Jaboti and other chatbots that there is a way, or even assessments, to understand whether candidates really on the move. Are they a really great fit? Are they ready to go into let's say, job process? And if you can automate these tasks, right, it will save the recruiter time calling him, not getting him on the phone, calling again, scheduling the task in your ATS or CRM to make sure that you follow up. But it can also be marketing activities, right? If there's a candidate group which you need to nurture, how can I automate creating the right touch points with the right audience to make sure that they are moving at the right time? Second is using data analytics and BI to understand where the bottlenecks currently is, and then to align supply and demand. So that means actually, like, if you understand what your business is doing, how all these sub-processes are working, what candidates you need, what channels you need to invest in to make sure that you have enough candidates, that you're even able to plan ahead, right? If you know that you always have a high demand of engineers in December, and you know the time to hire is 3 months, then start earlier by re-engaging with the candidates that were rejected in the past, start your hiring process to really make sure that you meet the goals of the business owner, and in this case the customer or the hiring manager. So this is one of the important steps. If you have these metrics, you can establish this baseline, you can establish this lean process, and really excel in a lean, mean recruitment machine. And having those two in place also gives you the opportunity, like Anna also described, to create this really awesome candidate experience. You have the information, you have the data, you know how people react. You can automate things to make sure that they fit the search profile of the candidates, so you can provide them this awesome experience. Right? So you can focus on how to make sure that one day I can help the candidate one bit further in his career. Either now or over 2 years, in 3 years, 4 years. Just keep in touch to make sure that you can really help this candidate forward. And becoming the go-to career coach for both the candidate as well as the hiring manager. With the hiring manager, what do we see in the market? What kind of candidates are coming in? What should you hire, right? So really engage in the conversation. Or with the candidate, ideally, how can I make sure that you excel at life, have a great work-life balance, and really find a company where you can be the best version of yourself. So challenge yourself, right? So in what stage of recruitment process am I investing the most time, and does that make sense? Do I really know where and what the bottlenecks is of my recruitment process? How can I split responsibilities in my team? Am I able to understand supply and demand? Am I providing a proper experience to highly qualified candidates? And to what extent am I using technology to automate high volume tasks? So with that, I want to leave you with those challenges, right? I won't say what we do, most people know what we do, but it's important to at least have this understanding. So what is the bottleneck of my organization? How am I going to mitigate that? And by knowing that, how can I then work on building a better and better candidate experience over the long run? Thank you.
Okay, I'll take this. Thank you very much, Dirk. Great talk, and great to kind of way to finish what has been a fantastic day. Dirk, there's actually a gift for you. So I think this may have come.
That's a first.
This may have come from like On Recruit's own budget. So you're going to give kind of a gift to yourself.
I know. Thanks.
So I think we're coming more or less to the end of the day. Hopefully you've had a